Boker Tov. Good morning, everyone.
Boker Tov.
Nice to see you. We have a different dimension to this day as well. Not that it's going to directly impact the class, but you know, with Yad Hashem, the hand of God, there's a connection of our class to the day as well, which hopefully will become clear as we proceed and maybe actually come near the end of our class. But today is Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the 17th day of Tammuz, which is a fast day. It is the day that commemorates the breaching of the siege that was the wall and the siege that was placed around Jerusalem and led to the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. So may our learning today, in addition to all the other good actions of the day, help bring us closer to the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. So I'm going to put us on mute right now. And when I ask you a question, I'll unmute us to give you a chance for you to participate. Okay, so the opening section, excuse me, I'd love to take a drink of water, but it's a fast day. The opening section of our Parsha is a direct continuation from last week's concluding episode. Actually, how direct in terms of how much time transpired is probably an interesting question we're not going to deal with, but by and large, it is a direct continuation of that last episode. In that episode, Zimri, who is the Nasi, the president, the head of the tribe of Shimon, and a woman dignitary, a daughter of a prince of Midian. Her name was Kazbi, the daughter of Tsur. The two of those people, the Jew, Zimri, and the non-Jewish woman, Cosby, were killed by Pinchas. That execution takes place in the context of another story. Balak, who had been unsuccessful in his attempt to hire Bilam to curse Bnei Yisrael and thereby in Balak's mind to weaken our nation and remove us as a military threat to them. Balak failed. Bilam did show up, but he only spoke blessings. He was not able to speak curses. So Bilam did not fulfill his mission, but he actually gave advice to Balak how he might accomplish his goal. And in that advice, he told King Balak that the God of the Jews is extremely sensitive to any violation of sexual appropriateness and modesty. He could have great wrath when there's sexual promiscuity going on. And so a plan is implemented. And many Jews were enticed both to worship Avodah Zarah, foreign gods, and to be sexually promiscuous. As this unfolds, Moshe is commanded by God to instruct leaders of the nation to judge those accused of engaging in such behaviors and to execute them. And at the same time, a plague began to rage through the nation. Now, while this corrective action that God commanded Moshe to do was taking place. Zimri and his cohort, Cosby, positioned themselves in what was at the time the most public place possible, at the entrance to the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting. So he had the focus of Bnei Yisrael as he had the audacity to engage in a sexual liaison, which was terminated by Pinchas. And Pinchas's action brought the end of the divine plague, which at its end tallied 24,000 people dead. That's the end of last week's Parsha. This week's Parsha basically opens with divine communication, acknowledging the legitimacy of what Pinchas did, the awarding by Hashem of a covenant of peace, Briti Shalom, to Pinchas, and a covenant of kahuna, of the priesthood, one understanding of which is that all legitimate Kohen Gadols, the high priests, will be descendants of Pinchas as part of his reward for defending God's name and helping to maintain appropriate values and morals in our nation. Now, in this morning, God's reaction, support of Pinchas, is conveyed in just 6 verses. And then Moshe is commanded, Saror et ha-Midyanim v'hikitem otam. You are to harass the Midianite nation for their role in trying to bring about the downfall of Bnei Yisrael. And at some point in the agenda, the hikitem otam, you're going to attack them. And then Hashem commands. And very interestingly, the Torah goes back to a 3-word reference in Hebrew. It says, Vayihi acharei hamagefa. It happened after the plague. And there's a break in the sentence, which is rare in the Torah, a break with space. And then the same technical verse continues and says that God spoke to Moshe and to Elazar, the son of Aaron, the Kohen, saying that they are to take a census of the people, a segment of the people. They're going to take a census of the men who are of the age of 20 and up. Now, what is the purpose of this count? I'm going to unmute you now. You have the chance. Unmuted, if you have allowed me to unmute you. Some are self-muted. Anybody want to volunteer a suggestion as to what the purpose of this count is? It's not the first in the Torah. Anyone want to suggest why? Going once, twice.
How do you do that?
What? I hear somebody. 1 second.
It's Linda Hoffman.
Yes, Linda, go ahead.
So the census was of people over 20 and under a certain age?
Right. Not exactly the upper age, not actually specified here. It just said 20 and up, but it will turn out to be, have a cap on it. And
I think it was because they wanted to see how many fighting people they had for an army.
Okay, so that's a valid suggestion. It's a very valid suggestion. The question is, why mention it here?
I don't get it.
Something happened.
Well, I guess I would defend you, Linda, by saying if at some, if we're commanded to harass Midian and to attack them, so we're going to attack them, not with internet-based strategies. We're going to attack them with an army. So your suggestion would fit in well with that command. There's already a certain command here about the army. Interestingly, Rashi doesn't make that connection. Rashi offers a parable, so cited from the Medrash, and the parable is about a shepherd and his flock, which is very apropos to Moshe. The Jewish leaders in general are identified in the Bible, Tanakh, as being shepherds of their people, and in many cases, their early profession was that of being a shepherd. In some ways, a quote-unquote test, development of the sensitivity, the character needed. While we don't compare human beings to animals, but one can develop certain capacities and certain sensitivities tending to the flock as well. And so Rashi cites the passage saying that it's like the shepherd who, after his flock was attacked by wolves, that he counts to see how many are left. And here we came out of the Magefa, of the plague that was brought about by Bnei Yisrael's deviation from God's commands. And there were casualties, so that Rashi, in his first opinion, makes this analogy that so too Moshe, that he's counting the nation, to see who is left. What's interesting about Rashi's decision of what to cite is that Rashi, in essence, is actually going backwards in time. Linda was going, also backwards, but more recent. Linda goes to cited that aspect that happened right before, that was spoken right before, about having to launch an attack against the Midianites. But Rashi goes back to the story that's connected to the opening part of the Parsha, more connected even to last week's Parsha, but since the beginning of our Parsha is really a continuation of last week's Parsha, it's one story. So Rashi makes that connection. But Linda's not the only one to look ahead. And among the commentators who look ahead are the Ibn Ezra and the Abarbanel. And they look ahead to what is mentioned after the census is completed. And that is the following. God speaks to Moshe saying, La'ela techalek haaretz b'nachala b'mispar shemot. To these shall you prepare to divide the land according to the numbers of the names, numbers of the families. So the land that we're talking about is, of course, the land of Israel. Moshe himself will not go there. He's still hoping that he will, but it's already been declared that he won't go. He fulfills all the divine commands, no matter what the personal cost or pain might be. And he's commanded to prepare this process to make the appointment of which tribe will get to which land. So says, for example, the Ibn Ezra says that if you're going to divide the land, and if the number of people, which is even further specified in the pasuk, in the verse following the one that I quoted, and you need to know that the portions of the land are going to be related somehow to the numbers of the population, so you have to know numbers. So we take a census. And the Abarbanel, in a very related comment, but from a different aspect of it, is that before you can physically take hold of that land that's going to be apportioned to you, You have to conquer the land. There are nations in the land of Israel, in the land of Canaan. And they're not walking away so simply. Only one nation of 7 did that. But there are 6 nations that have to be dealt with. And if you're going to have to deal with them, you're going to have to conquer their land, you're going to need an army. And so the census, to the Ibn Ezra, to the Abarbanel, they represent the school of thought that even more so than the fact that we have to make some kind of attack on Midian, which is not in the same category as the nations inhabiting the land of Canaan / Israel, so that the census is declared before the commandment was given to divide the land, so that one sees that things are in order. This is real. We're on our way. We will be crossing the boundary from the desert over the Jordan River and into the mainland of Israel. It's a very, very real thing. So that's some of the dynamics of the very beginning of the Parsha. But I'd like to go back to the census itself. You know, in truth, and the census is kind of very straightforward. Chas v'shalom, we should say dry. Very often, a Torah reading, or a couple of examples that it takes place and it's given in detail. So the census winds up adding time to Kriyas Torah, and we're sort of hearing the same thing. We hear people's names, we hear tribes, and we hear numbers, subset of families. It's a very straightforward pattern. Very often the musical incantation associated with the words follows the patterns. And I want to cite to you just an example of that. I want to read, it's actually the second entry. We'll go back to the first. The second entry is for the tribe of Shimon. And the Torah says, I'm looking at the Hebrew right now, but I'm going to translate it as I scan it. The sons of Shimon to their families, to Nimuel, the Nimueli family, to Yamin, the Yemini family, to Yachin, the Yachini family, to Zerach, the Zarchi family, to Shaul, the Shauli family. Eile Mishpachot HaShimoni, these are the families of the Shimon tribe that will be the main branches of the portion of land to be allocated to Shimon. And then in that last verse, it actually gives the number of the census, one of the smaller ones, Shnayim ve'esrim elef u'matayim, 22,200 of those men counted in the census. It's only 3 verses, and it's very, very typical of most of the entries in the census count. You could take a greater look yourselves at your leisure today on Shabbos, before Shabbos. But I want to read to you Reuven, and listen carefully, please. Reuven, the firstborn of Israel, meaning of Jacob. The sons of Reuven are Chanoch, the family of Chanochi, Falu, 2 Falu, same pattern having the lamed at the beginning, the Palui family, to Chetzron, the Chetzroni family, to Carmi, the Carmi family. These are the families of Reuven, and their numbers were 43,730. Uvenei Falu Eliav, the sons of one of the aforementioned is Eliav. It says sons, but then only identifies Eliav. And the sons of Eliav are Nimuel, Datan, and Aviram. Now, these are the same This is still translation. This is the same Datan and Aviram who were summoned to the congregation that arose to challenge Moshe and Aaron, part of the Korach challenge, which was really a rebellion against God. That's the end of one verse. And then 2 more verses to come. The second one only 4 words, but the Pasuk 10, when this referring back to what happened with Datan and Aviram at that time of the rebellion, the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them and Korach among the congregation, and there was a fire, fire that consumed the 250 other men who rose to challenge Moshe and Aharon. And then the final verse, Uvenei Korach lo metu, the children of Korach did not die. I just unmuted. I think I tried to, most of you are still muted. So if you want to unmute to respond to a question, but what would you say about comparing what was actually the first installment in the census of Reuven? He was the firstborn. He doesn't get too much, leadership, but he is the head of one of the camps on the side of the Mishkan, and will lead 2 other tribes into battle or formation when they have to travel. But what's different between this description of Reuven and Shimon? Shimon being typical of the ones that will follow, Reuven not being typical, although there is another little exception. But
I think the reminder of the rebellion and who took part. We shouldn't forget that was the tribe that had rebellious members.
okay, Turner, it's a great point, but why make it here in the middle of a census?
Just a reminder, maybe.
All right, well, we'll see. Okay.
I need reminders all the time.
Okay, you're kind to others. So I want to go to another reference that Korach gets here. Now, first of all, Korach died already, back in Parsha's Korach, but he is mentioned here in the terms of being the father of his sons. So, and that's in contradistinction to Dasan and Aviram and other people that perished, that died during the revolt. But the actual sons of Korach, the sons of the leader of the revolt, broke with their father, and as a result, they were spared. They did not die. There's another reference to Korach after the census. After the census, I should have muted you all now. But when I ask the question, you can even unmute yourselves. Will save me a couple of steps. But after the census, we read of a small group. It's a small group of women who approach Moshe and Elazar HaKohen. Moshe and Elazar are the ones who are responsible for making these early plans. I mean, not so early, but Moshe's not going to be part of those that cross over into the land. But Moshe and Elazar HaKohen are making these arrangements for the assignment of portions of land to the tribes. And it appears, it's going by male heads of families. And so the daughters of Slovchad approach Moshe and Elazar, also at the entrance of Ohel Moed, interestingly. And they say, oh, what do you think they're going to say? You can unmute yourself if you want to give an answer. Actually, it's 11:55, so I'm going to take over. So they say, Avinu meit bamidbar. Our father died in the desert. Now they want to make the point, which they do state in the verse, The last few words of the verse say, Uvanim lo hayulo. Our father had no sons, but he has daughters. But in between that, in between saying their father's dead, so he can't receive the land, and and saying that he has no sons, they make a statement. The hu lo haya b'toch ha'eda. He was not part of that congregation that rose up against God following Korach, because he died because of his own account. Whatever that means, we might discuss that Shabbos afternoon if you're interested. He died for his own sin. If that's specific, an expression, but the point that the daughters of Slavchad make is that their father had nothing to do with Korach. Now, why would that be important? Because it seems to be that the daughters of Korach understood the message that maybe Chern is trying to identify already in the first details of the census given to the tribe of Reuven. Many in the tribe of Reuven had gripes because they lost being the firstborn in most ways, and Korach was prodding them on. So that's Datan and Avira, they're off the record. That's it. The sons of Korach stay on the record because they distance themselves from their father. But the daughters of Slavchad understood that if you represent what Korach represented, if you're rebelling against God, and maybe Rav Bazak in his Sefer Nekudat Piticha makes the point that we should remember that Datan and Avira. When I say to you, Eretz Zavat Chalav U'Davash, what do you think of? We think of Israel, right? Eretz Zavat Chalav. That's what we think of Israel. But Datan and Avira had the chutzpah against God and against Moshe, that when Moshe summoned them to come and talk to him before they go ahead with more steps of this rebellion, and it has terrible consequences, he says, I want to talk with you. And they say, we're not going to come and talk to you. And they accuse Moshe of taking them out of the land flowing with milk and honey. Egypt was the land flowing with milk and honey, they say. You took us out of Egypt to be in this desert? You're a leader? That was part of the challenge against Moshe and decisions that they thought he was making when he was only a delegate of God. So the message that the census gives us and that the daughters of Slavchad realize, if you're going to slander the land of Israel, you're going to slander the land promised by God, beware that there may be a cost to that. They declared to Moshe, their family, Baruch Hashem, is not guilty of that. In fact, they become known, and the tribe of Manasseh becomes known for their love of Eretz Yisrael. We mourn today what is still partial destruction of the land of Israel because we're not complete. God's nation cannot be complete without the Beit HaMikdash. We remember the tragedy today, and we commit ourselves to rebuild and to retain the love of the land of Israel that the daughters of Slavchad demonstrated. We should all have a meaningful day, a powerful day, and momentarily, I'm going to unmute us all. I think you all have the ability to self-unmute if you would like. Just give me a moment. I have done what I can do to unmute. The rest is up to you.
Have an easy fast.
And meaningful, thank you. I think that sounded like George, I think. Thank you.
It was, George. I noted that on the email invitation, that we should listen to the shir before lunch. Well, I'd love to go to lunch, but I
Thank
think
you.
That's true. We didn't revise it for this week. Good point.
Okay.
All right.
Good day,
Good week.
Rabbi.
Thank
Good day to you too. Good to see everybody.
Thank you.
Have a meaningful, my pleasure. Have a meaningful day. So now I see more people, Shmuel and Henya, Arlene,
Stay safe, everybody.
Barbara Yazger, Ron, George, Barbara and Joe. Good to see you guys. Moshe, Tova, Raz. I think Karen's also on.
Looks like Jane Cole.
Is it-
Jane, hi.
Okay. A good day to all. Thanks for joining
Yeah.
with me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You guys can.